In my last video about Unreal Engine 5, we talked primarily about Lumen and Nanite, and these are the features that almost everyone knows about, they more or less understand. And I said in that video I wanted to release a video talking about some of the lesser known features of the engine. And I actually wanted to get this video out a lot sooner, but my research into UE5 kind of led me down a pretty deep rabbit hole. There was just so much information and so many cool new features that can be used by Ashes to kind of make it one of the next generation of video games. And I was originally kind of trying to compile all these features into one video, but there's just so much that instead I've decided to make it a series of videos. So, over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be releasing some videos covering one or two of the features from UE5 and kind of what those features mean for the future of Ashes. I may also revisit some of the older features that were carried over from Unreal Engine 4, but now have gotten easier to use or have better applications due to some of the newer features in Unreal Engine 5. So for the rest of this video, however, I actually want to cover some of my concerns and the potential issues I see with Unreal Engine 5. And just a disclaimer, I'm not a programmer. I have done a lot of research, hours and hours of research. But if you do disagree with something I say, or if I get anything wrong, please definitely let me know in the comments below. So the first thing I want to look at is the actual potential negatives of nanite. And I covered this a little in the last video, but there are two potential problems I see. And the first one is kind of the obvious downside of the increased hardware requirements. Now, the nice thing is supposedly it's not supposed to be that much more taxing on your GPU or CPU. And we can see here in the Siege video, it's showing 1300 actors, and this is supposedly being run on a 1080, while the demo Steven did is supposedly on a 2080. And by the time Ashes is actually released, you should hopefully be able to get the equivalent of a 2080 relatively cheaply. And the nice thing about Nanite is it scales really well. It allows you to keep relatively low requirements while still allowing to scale into those epic visual settings for those with really expensive hardware. The biggest downside, however, is probably the size of the game. And you're probably going to want a relatively large SSD, if not a Mark II hard drive, to run this game. The potential scaling means that the assets can essentially be huge in terms of file size before the nanite algorithm actually scales them down to be rendered. But luckily these days, large size, even Mark II drives are relatively cheap. Now, my biggest concern with nanite is actually not a problem with nanite itself, but it's how the developers choose to use it. There is a reason many video games, and especially MMOs, actually use flat terrain and objects without many polygons in them, and that is collision. Now, you can see here in Steven's video that all of these high definition objects within the cave, they look amazing, but they're also causing collision with the character. Now, also remember that Ashes is going to have a full character collision as well. So imagine running through this cave with a 40-person raid, or having a 40 versus 40 battle, or even just doing a small scale battle, but with really fast paced PvP. This could start to feel really clunky or incredibly frustrating if your character is getting stuck on objects or having to slow down to vault over objects. But as Steven mentions later in the AMA, this could also create some really fun and creative ways to battle. So it just kind of depends on how all this is implemented and how it feels. I mean, how easy is it going to be to get caught on something? Will vaulting be automatic or require a button press? Either implementation could feel clunky or bad, but Steven's statement here does show that they are already aware of this, and if it does become a potential issue, they will take measures to solve it.
From a design perspective, we're going to want to make sure, obviously, it doesn't impact negatively the idea of PvP. So really what it provides, in my opinion, as a person who enjoys PvP, is it adds additional dynamics to what is possible from your opponent or from yourself. If there's a ledge and jumping off that ledge is going to deal a lot of damage to me when I hit the ground, and that puts me at a significant disadvantage, maybe I have an option to jump off the ledge at a point where I can mantle onto the side of a cliff or something. Now, the give and take there is I won't be able to use my skills while I'm mantled, right? I won't be able to react easily, but I didn't have to take the fall damage per se. Or if there's an obstruction and I'm going to take a significant reduction in speed so that I can crouch and make it past that, and now I have a effective line of sight has been obstructed as a result of that decision. I think it adds interesting elements to the battlefield. And the key here is going to be making sure that it's not cumbersome, that it doesn't feel opposite of the flow of combat in PvP, right? That's something that's going to take some finesse. It's something that's going to take some testing. It's something that we're going to prototype with. But the functionality that's been implemented with the efforts of Alex Cadoli, one of our senior engineers, and our lead animator, Chris Myers, they've done a great job in getting this implemented. And now it is a tool in the tool set that design has to work with. And is it possible that we might come back and design says, look, there wasn't a way for us to make these additional functionalities congruent with our flow of PvP? Yeah, of course, there's always that potential. But it's been interesting to play with thus far.
So this is just another one of those things that moving forward, the community is going to have to provide feedback on. The feel of something just requires a lot of testing and iterations to get right. Unreal Engine 5 does have some really cool features called full body inverse kinematic and motion warping, which will help to make these movements feel really natural and fluid, but that's actually going to be a discussion for an entire video of its own. Now, my last concern about Unreal Engine 5 is actually with what Steven said about how the switch to Unreal Engine 5 has no effect on their work on the backend or servers. And I'm not a programmer, as I said before, and I couldn't really find any information specifically about this throughout my many hours of research and reading and watching a bunch of different videos on UE5. But we have seen it where servers couldn't handle everything happening in many MMO games. And I'm optimistic that Intrepid can get this to work. I mean, we already saw in alpha that the servers were handling better than most modern games. However, if we're looking at these potentially 250 on 250 battles or even higher, certain things like the object destruction using the chaos physics engine, the motion warping, and the full body inverse kinematics, they're gonna require the server to handle more data flow. I believe Lumen is also handled client side, but the server is still gonna need to send extra data for all the different light sources. Steven said that there is potential for the spells to use Lumen in cool ways, but I don't know how taxing this will be on the server or even the client when you have hundreds of people in a small area. And as I said, just because I have concerns doesn't mean that it can't be done, but it is intended to kind of set expectations. I mean, MMOs for decades have had to sacrifice graphics and various other features in order to allow the massive part of the MMO to actually work. So, in my opinion, it is possible that some of the features I talk about, um, they they're not going to be used to their full functionality within Ashes, and that's just because it is an MMO. In my opinion, the best part of upgrading to UE5 is actually that it's one step closer to future-proofing this game. UE5 should allow them to scale future content somewhat seamlessly. As hardware increases in strength and becomes readily available, I mean, hopefully it becomes more readily available soon, it should allow them to increase graphics and increase features and what the game is capable of doing without having to completely rewrite the core code. And the other thing is, Ashes is actually the first major MMO to announce the use of UE5, which means that it should actually really help Ashes. Epic Games is going to want to work very closely with Intrepid because the success of Ashes of Creation will actually mean more business for Epic. So hopefully this means that any potential problems or issues is something that the two studios working together can overcome. But anyway, that's all for this video. If you did enjoy the content, please drop a like and subscribe. It helps support the channel and keeps you up to date on future content. Thanks for watching.